We're back, baby. Horns up, talking Texas. Nick Kreider, Josh Fisher, Alex Asopoulos, Quan Cosby. Unfortunately, could not make it today. Family emergency. Wishing him all the best and to his family. It is Texas versus A&M week, and we're excited. And it's been a long time since we did, so we got to get a guest on the show. My former high school quarterback, former A&M quarterback, now doing the pregame show for KBTX for the Aggies. Jake Hubenak. What's going on, man?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a long-awaited collab that we've been having to do. I mean, obviously, we haven't played each other since 2011, back when you were throwing passes to me. But
Yeah.
uh, but now it's fun that we have the family rivalry going on. I don't really have any family that has any ties to Texas or A&M, but I sure have a lot of high school friends that all went to A&M.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're stuck in a group chat with about 10 of us that it's all A&M and then Nick's over there by himself.
Yeah, I mean, I reference it quite a bit. I think some guys are a little more overbearing than others. We won't mention too many names. His name rhymes with rock, but I think everyone else has been pretty even keeled for the most part, because they know, like, at the end of the day, like, this is a very long historic rivalry that's just been dormant for the last 13 years now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's pretty wild, especially, being a player that played in the time that those games weren't played. You grow up, you want to play in that game. I was telling you guys, I was, grew up an A&M fan, was a Longhorn fan for a little while there. My dad went to A&M, his dad went to UT, so I've definitely seen, both parts of it. And then you get there, and then the rivalry's gone. It's just it's exciting that it's back, but it kind of sucked being there in that time when the game wasn't played.
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think for us too, like, it got teased a couple of times, like throughout like the bowl selection years, where it was like maybe Texas and Texas A&M have a chance to play each other, but I feel like they never really wanted to do it because they wanted to make it a meaningful game. We had a couple of basketball matchups that were fun. Obviously, baseball has always been fun, but football, it's been a long time. Before we get into everything, I just want to go through and let people know your journey as an Aggie and as just a college football fan in general. So, dad went to A&M, kind of grew up an A&M fan, and then obviously played high school football with us. We went to the state championship where we ultimately lost to Denton Guider and Gerard Hurd in
I've
Jerry
heard
World. Yeah,
Longhorn.
that was a tough one for us, but still, you were all district MVP as a quarterback, and then you go to Blinn, right, to start your
Went to
college career.
Oklahoma State actually for a year out of high school. Figured, I probably wasn't going to end up playing there. Got injured. I mean, obviously, as you remember, got injured my junior year, so that kind of hurt recruiting and everything. So went to Oklahoma State, loved it, great place. People in Stillwater are awesome. But just
What are
kind
your
of
thoughts
wanted to
on
get
Gundy?
I loved Gundy. He was a great guy. He's very hands off as far as, like, I think that's like a misconception that a lot of people have about college football coaches, especially now with like the NIL world, is like they don't have time to really be hands-on coaches. There's some of them. There's the Lincoln Rileys of the world, the Sarkisians of the world that are still in there calling the offense. But a lot of coaches, they want to be the CEO type now. They want to take their hands off. They want to, be shaking hands with boosters during practice and focusing on recruiting. So he was that guy back when I was there. He'd show up at quarterback drills every once in a while, and he'd come like try to punch a ball out of your hand or whatever. But he was just kind of, that happy-go-lucky, sarcastic kind of guy you see in the press conferences. Like, that is him every
Yeah,
single day.
I mean, it's
I
crazy
love,
if you look
yeah, I love
across
playing for him.
college football, like, he's one of the longest tenured coaches in all of college
Yeah,
football at the university,
yeah.
right?
And it's hard, especially being an alumni there. Like, I feel like that's one of those things where they're going to let him be there as long as possible. There's been some down years where they're like, should we let him go? And then there's been years where, like, he's rumored to get, other bigger jobs. It's a tough spot to be in, especially, when they were always having to recruit against Texas and OU. Now both those schools are gone, but now the Big 12 as a whole is kind of, not as attractive as it was before. So that's kind of the battle that I feel like they're facing over there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who's the quarterback room that you had there at Oklahoma State?
We had Clint Shelf, who was just kind of like, your average, like solid starting quarterback in college. He didn't go on to play in the NFL or anything, but he was really solid. And then J.W. Walsh was right there with him. We kind of did some packages with J.W. He started a couple games that year. And then same kind of thing. He just, was only a college guy, didn't make it to the NFL or anything. But we were a pretty solid team that year. I think we went 10-2. Went to the Cotton Bowl and ended up losing to Missouri, and that was the Missouri team that had Shane Ray and Michael Sam on the D line. So, I mean, they were solid over there. Yeah, it was a fun season. Loved it there. Decided, I kind of want to go through the whole recruiting process again. Went to Blinn. Actually had some pretty big name dudes at receiver for me at Blinn. We had D.D. Westbrook, who went and won the Blitnikoff at OU. And then my roommate at Blinn and also at A&M was Damian Ratley, who ended up being in the league for about 4 or 5 years, kind of as a receiver and special teams guy. But we were pretty dynamic on offense. We were able to throw the ball deep on just about everybody we played. We were throwing for like over 500 yards a game.
Jesus.
That was definitely a different, you go from Oklahoma State, you have like some of the best facilities in the country, to Blinn where you're having fun, you're playing, but at the same time, it's like, you get your clothes back every day and they're still kind of wet from the washing machine the day before. And like, what we had in high school was better than what we had at Blinn. So I was like, okay, let's get out of here as fast as possible. We had a really good season, was able to kind of get re-recruited. It was down to like LSU, Florida, and A&M. But when A&M offered me, I was like, I can't turn this opportunity down. It's in hindsight, I probably should have thought about it a little bit more because I walked into a quarterback room with Kyle. But it was just, when you get the opportunity to play at the school that you always dreamed of, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I remember too when you came over there, and that was the year as well that Kyle Allen and Kyler Murray both transferred, and then so that left you there. So it obviously worked out, and then your debut was against Louisville and Lamar Jackson in the bowl game, right?
Yeah. Obviously, and that was like Lamar before everybody, because he had kind of switched off with another guy. That was his true freshman year. And so we kind of like knew that, everybody had seen the viral clip in high school of him like doing the juke on the 1 yard line and have the dude go flying by, and like, okay, this dude's dynamic, he's good. But like, that was kind of his coming out party against us. I remember our defensive coordinator at the time was like, make the quarterback beat us. Like, we don't want to let the running back get the ball. Like, let the quarterback pull the ball. And I was like, at halftime, I'm like, can we switch the game plan? Like, stop letting this guy pull the ball on zone read. He was just, absolutely electric, and, got to go kind of like shake his hand after the game or whatever. And then the next year he goes and wins the Heisman. You're like, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better that they beat us. But
and now he's won. Now it could be his third MVP this year.
Yeah.
So
he's absolutely electric. It's like when you're playing, you don't want to be a fan of like a guy on the other team, but you can just watch people and know like, oh, he's going to be special.
Yeah, it's like not exactly the same. It's pretty similar to how we kind of felt about Gerard Hurd when we played against him in high school.
It's kind of what it's like. It's one of those moments where you're like, we better do something or this is going to get away from us quick. Like,
yeah,
we were able to answer them a couple times in that game, at Georgetown against Louisville, kind of both of those times. But at the end of the day, sometimes those guys are just so special, and there's only so much you can do.
Especially at high school too, when like the talent discrepancy is like so deep. To put in perspective for you, Josh and Toss, like we had a lead at halftime. I think we were up by like a touchdown.
23-14 at half.
Yeah,
okay, 9 points. We scored the opening drive to come out of half too, so it was 30-14 at one point.
Yep, Gerard Hurd accounted for all 7 of their touchdowns. He threw for 5 and rushed for 2.
I think, yeah.
So
yep, that sounds like the game where he balled out against Cal, and then we ended up not winning that game at DKR. But I can imagine what it was like in high school with Juice. He was something else for sure. Yeah. The fact that you played against Lamar is like,
well, that reminds me of that Cal game. Like y'all talking about, like not wanting to be a fan of the other guy. Like the quarterback on Cal was Jared Goff. Sitting there, with guys like he was. I I mean, I talk about this a lot to other people because fortunately, and I mean, Jake, you lived it more than we did. Like, and Nick was on the sideline for a year. Like, you're in these games and you're really going and you're playing against and seeing a lot of sick players, a lot, and in practice with like a lot of nasty dudes. Like when we were in school, Texas didn't have it, so that's why we're like so stoked about Quinn and Arch, right? Like we're so stoked about these guys because we didn't have this, but the guys we played against were awesome. Like we saw, I mean, throughout our year, Baker, Kyler, Goff. You know, we weren't there for Hurts, but like at the games you'd see him. We saw Caleb when we went against OU. You know, and these guys were just so Mahomes. These guys were just so damn good.
It's pretty wild how you can like tell so quickly, like when somebody's just different. Like there was two experiences that I had when I was at A&M, and one, the very first time I ever walked into the weight room, Myles Garrett was on the hang clean rack, and he's got 315, no shoes on, and he's just like over there repping it. Like 315 was always like my goal to be my max on hang clean, but he's over there just repping it. He's got no shoes on. Like, oh, okay, that guy's different. And then I tell people all the time too, like I was kind of under recruited. I always, kind of felt like I had the chip on my shoulder type deal. And so I always felt like, I just wasn't really given, the same shake as everybody. I'm better than everybody that I've ever gone up against. And we got to fall camp and I saw Kyler throw the ball for the first time. I'm like, okay, maybe this one's different. Maybe he's got an edge on me. And he's, like, small little dude. Like you don't expect that, that amount of power and zip to come out of the ball, but he threw like a comeback far hash, and you're like, yeah, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, and that's only what he does with his arm too. I mean, his legs.
Exactly. Yeah, and then he goes taking off running, and you're like, yeah, I got no chance here.
He's just so stocky though, too. I mean, he's a baseball player too, so he has the arm, and he's underratedly, because we didn't see him play baseball. We just saw him get drafted in the MLB. Yeah. Like, how many guys are getting picked in the top 10 in the MLB and NFL draft in a span of 2 years? Like one of the best him. Like it's like one of the best athletes in the world. Yeah, it's pretty well. And maybe to cater and segue into our game. Not that I have crushes on anybody on your team because you're the enemy. You really are the enemy this time. But there are some dudes on your squad, specifically on the defensive line, that I think we would be remiss if we didn't begin the discussion there. Because we believe that on offense, our strength is the offensive line. We have Calvin Banks, who is a premier offensive tackle, has a very good chance of being the first offensive tackle off the board in the NFL draft, in the 2024 NFL draft. But on the flip side, on the Aggies side, Nick Scorton, the transfer from Purdue, who's fit really well with Mike Elko, and Shamar Stewart, who's been really strong, is in 6'6", 290. Yeah, both those guys are
like built in a factory.
Literally one of those guys is built in a factory. It's like those two guys. I mean, Scorton could be the first edge taken for sure. It's definitely plausible. And then Stewart can definitely be a first round pick. So I'd love to hear your take on both those guys there. Maybe some other dudes like a Will Lee on the defense who've been really strong for you guys that can give our Longhorns some problems.
Yeah, the matchup that I think everybody was excited about when this game got announced was y'all's offensive line against our defensive line. It's littered with guys that are probably going to be in the league for a long time coming, whether they're kind of guys that are known right now or if they're kind of the next guys up. But yeah, the guys you mentioned, Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart, those are the first two that, as an offensive line, you better know where they are every single time they line up. They're game wreckers. They're guys that if you leave them unblocked in any type of like zone read or read play, like they're just going to attack the mesh point and just blow it up. I think we were playing Arkansas earlier this year and they tried to run like a power read type deal and did like a false pull. And Shamar Stewart just ran back there and he just tackled both of them. And the guy fumbles the ball because at that point you're like, you take it. Neither one of us want it. So yeah, those are kind of your game wreckers from the D-line standpoint. Shamar Turner's another guy. He can kind of play interior. He can play on the outside. He's versatile. He's got a ton of experience. I think he's a 3-year starter now at this point. The guy that can really make some plays on the defensive side is Dalton Brooks in the secondary. I think he's from Shiner. He's in his second year now. He was a true freshman last year, kind of got to play later in the year. He was one of those guys that ran for like 3,000 yards in high school, just playing at a small school, playing both ways, and, ultimately ended up becoming a safety for us. But he's a guy that you're going to see, he'll be down near the line of scrimmage a bunch. They just want to have him chasing the ball wherever, they think it's going to be going. So, he'll walk down in the box, he'll blitz off the edge. He's strong in pass coverage. So he's kind of one of those guys that, talking about what y'all do well, what y'all secondary does well, taking the ball away, he's kind of one of those guys that you definitely want to always have an eye on and make sure that, you're not pushing it too much when it's going his way.
And with those players, do you feel like there's a certain focus on limiting whatever Texas does best? And Texas is a very versatile offense. Under Sark, there's a lot of different things we can do.
Yep.
A lot of different playmakers who excel in space. So what do you think that, just top down, what the defensive game plan will be for the Aggs?
Yeah, that's where I think it's tough because, just looking at our past couple of weeks, we've kind of got exposed in multiple areas in the run game and in the deep passing game, which, something that I think y'all do really well is explosive plays. So, that's going to be, something that I feel like they're going to be talking about. We can't be giving up explosive plays. Obviously, that's kind of everybody. I think if we're going to give up anything, it's going to be, hey, try to run the ball on us. I think, not that Texas doesn't have a strong running game, but compared to some of the ones, going against South Carolina, who's got a really good running quarterback, you got Auburn, who has like one of the top rushers in the SEC. Going to Texas, you're more worried about Quinn's arm and the receivers, making plays down the field. So I think you're just kind of trying to maybe bend, don't break a little bit, and then picking your spots on, when you want to put pressure on Quinn, when you want to kind of try to get the crowd into the game a little bit. There was the Georgia game where, Quinn was a little bit gun shy at sometimes. He didn't want to move around too much in the pocket. So I think you're going to have to try to get pressure with 4 and 5, because if you start bringing pressure with too many, Sark's screen game is just so good that if you start to overload, on a blitz or something, if you hit Wisner or Jaden Blue out of the backfield on a screen and you've got it blocked up, those guys are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you bring up this screen game. It's something that the Texas media feels very split on. A lot of people don't mind the pick apart. Like, look, and I personally am a fan of it. Keep the drive alive, get it going, get in rhythm, get completions, stack completions, and then keep the clock moving. Some people hate the dink and dunk to death. I grew up a Patriots fan. I'm not Texas like you guys, and we say this on our show. Like, I watched Tom Brady every weekend for pretty much my whole life. And that was his MO. He dinked and dunked you to it was like Edelman, Hogan, Amendola, Welker, Edelman, Amendola, like just like a cycle of these dudes. Yes, we had Randy Moss, but like even when Hernandez was there and Gronk, like pepper these guys, like Keith Falk, like Woodhead, like, and that's how you like win games. Keep the ball out of the other team's hands. It's very simple. And I think I'm glad you brought up the Georgia game because you guys do have similar talent on the defensive side of the ball. Like they had Jalen Walker and Kel Williams. Like we said, you guys have Stewart and Scorton. Like you guys have guys that can be real game wreckers and home wreckers.
Yep.
One of the issues we ran into against Georgia was A, bad field position, and B, we couldn't get anything in rhythm, and we just had a lot of third and longs, a ton of third and longs. We couldn't get those short completions going and that run game going. But I think we saw it last week. We had a 15-play, 0-pass drive for a score.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a nice drive for sure. I mean,
which was
obviously,
I mean, like one
Trey, eat on the ground. That was his biggest game of his career. But yeah, I'm a fan of the dink and dunk too. I mean, I think Jake, you can probably attest to this. Like quarterback play sometimes is just about getting in the groove, like getting your confidence in there, completing passes. Like doesn't matter if the pass is completed for a yard or if it's for 20 yards. Like it's a completion to help you kind of get your groove in there, right?
Yep. Yeah. And you're the great Mike Wall. He always taught me, never turn down what the defense gives you. And I think people overlook that. There's, like you said, media can get split on it, but half the time people really don't know what they're talking about. And, they think sometimes when Quinn is throwing, a screen on the perimeter or one of those bubbles or something like that, he's doing what the defense is telling him to do. If they're overloading the box against the run, yeah, he's going to throw the ball on the perimeter. That might not be called a called screenplay. That's just him reacting to what he's seeing from the defense. Now there's some of the screens that are designed where you're trying to, slip the running back out, or, the throwback screen that you guys do really well. But a lot of the, the dinking and the dunking is they've got 8 guys in the box. So he's going to throw the ball out on the perimeter, and, the defense kind of determines what you've got to do sometimes. So, to say that he's not managing the game properly or doing what he's supposed to do is, completely inaccurate, because he's ultimately just reacting to what the defense is giving him.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair too, if you look at his stats as well, like a lot of his interception, I think like 3 or 4 of his interceptions have been tips.
Yeah,
have been just like, tipped in the air right to the defense. It happened against Georgia a couple of times. Happened in another game as well when he came back. But yeah, I mean, I think also with our wide receiver room that's just so deep, like I'm okay with that all day long. Like if you're a team that has like one star wide receiver, then it's like, okay, let's get the ball in that guy's hands. But like with Golden, with Bond, with DeAndre Moore, with Ryan Wingo, with Silas Bolden, like all these guys are huge playmakers. And like if you just give them a little bit of space, like let's see what they can do with the ball in their hands, no matter if the ball is completed 2 yards down the field or 20 yards down the field.
Yeah, why leave it up?
Why leave it through? I mean, that's another guy that haven't even mentioned. You go now, you're worrying about all the perimeter, and that guy can just eat up the middle of the field. And if you leave him one-on-one, you're not going to stop him.
Yeah, he's huge.
Yeah, he's a complete matchup nightmare.
He's risen. Him and Alfred Collins, and maybe even Jade have rose their stock as much as anybody, if not more, on our team. On offensive side of the ball for you guys, it's been somewhat of a revolving door at quarterback, right? Like you're going with Reed, and what are you looking for your offense to do against, I am happy to say, the strongest side of the ball for the Texas Longhorns, our defense?
Yeah, I think just, watching a lot of Texas games, because there's 2 teams I root for on Saturdays. It's A&M and whoever Texas is playing. So I watch a lot of you guys' games, and something that I think too many teams have gotten away from is they'll run the ball successfully, and then they're like, okay, we're running the ball well. They'll probably stack the box. Let's try to throw it deep. And I mean, y'all's secondary might be, I don't want to say DBU too early, but they're definitely starting to work back towards that direction. Just so much talent on the back end. It seems like anytime a ball is a little bit off or tipped, or even if it's a good throw, it's just, I mean, y'all have to be leading.
We're leading the SEC. Yeah, we're second in the nation in picks.
I mean, it feels like there's constantly balls that are getting intercepted. And so I think for A&M, it's almost take the air out of the ball. Marcel Reed obviously is a great runner. We've got a really strong offensive line in the run game. It hurts that Le'Veon Moss got hurt a couple weeks back because he was kind of our bell cow, but Amari Daniels is a really strong runner. We got Terry Bussey in the backfield a little bit last week, who he's kind of one of those guys that he was a quarterback last year in high school. I think he was Mr. Texas high school football or whatever, playing at a small school. We had him at DB to start the year with, kind of just needing some help on offense, moved him to receiver. Now we're working him kind of in the backfield a little bit. He's kind of your, Jaden Blue type body. Like he's not a big body that's going to be a bruiser, but he can go in between the tackles when he needs to. But he's a guy that if he gets kind of out on the edge a little bit, he can be dangerous. So I'm expecting to see some different ways to get the run game involved, whether it's, quarterback run game, whether it's, motioning some receivers and running kind of like some power read type deals. And then working RPOs off of that, just because I think if it becomes a drop back pass game with y'all's D line and y'all's defensive backfield, there's just it's hopeless.
I mean, I feel like our kryptonite for years and a little bit this year too is running quarterback. So if there's anything I'm a little worried of, it's that. It's funny you mentioned Terry Busey, because I think we were talking pre-show that a lot of these kids don't really know this rivalry that well because the fact that they were in elementary school when it was last played, and so many of these guys are from out of state as well. But I guess one thing to consider is that almost all these players got recruited by both schools. Yeah. I remember that we were in the mix for Terry Busey as well. It was just between us two at one point, and obviously picks A&M. And Anthony Hill, like he's a guy who committed to A&M and flipped over to us. Like, so there's definitely some little things, you know, here and there, although they haven't really played this game or seen this game since they were kids. But the recruiting trail, I think, has a lot to do with it as well.
Well, even on the coaching staff, like Jeff Banks, he was the guy that recruited me to A&M. So, I mean, talking about, you know, kind of going into an environment maybe you never played before, I mean, that's something that I'm sure he'll be telling the players about, hey, kind of here's some things to expect, you know, that type deal, and just kind of his familiarity with Kyle Field and A&M and, you know, all of that.
I'd love to hear more about Banks because everyone says he's this amazing recruiter. What makes him so good, you think?
I think he just has a passion for what he's doing. I think that's the most important thing about, you know, one, being a good coach, but also being a really good recruiter is, you know, when I just remember like the conversations I would have with him on the phone, like he was very intentional. Like he remembered like the last conversations we had. He was, you know, talking about kind of what the future is going to look like. It just didn't feel like you're kind of like standard, hey, I'm just like, you know, making sure I check a box and call you. Like he was very engaged with what we were talking about. And, you know, he's the same way. I think when recruits go probably watch a game or practice, like they see that he's that same way at practice, right? A game, like he's very engaged. He's an absolute psychopath. Like he probably drinks 15 Red Bulls a day. He never stops. Like he's just one of those guys that just
loves to talk.
Goes. But like, that's what you want in a, you know, special teams coordinator. Like that's a guy that, you know, cares about his job, is passionate about what he's doing and wants to do well. So it made total sense when Sark brought him over from Alabama.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask that too, Nick. He's a guy that we're always hearing about in the recruiting trail. And like, that's great to hear that these guys, I'm sure it feels special for you as a player because you did have other offers, right? Like, and you want a coach that's going to help you get better and be engaged and be a part of your life in that capacity, I imagine. Speaking of coaches, new guy came in, you had the sexy pick, you had the Jimbo pick, you had the highest recruiting class, didn't work out. Elko comes in, defensive-minded guy, not necessarily the sexiest choice, but I guess even similar to us, and it's early, it's season 1, but has the makings of being the right guy. For sure. You know, the old Herb Brooks, like, not necessarily the best guy, but the right guy. And I feel like that was like us for
He's done a lot better than Sark did his first year. I'll tell you that.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, for us, it was like, oh my God, Urban Meyer's in Austin, Texas, like Urban Meyer's like hanging out and like, you know, did someone see like Frank, you know, someone saw him at Franklin's online, like Nick Saban's wife, like is looking on Zillow in Austin. That's what it was like. It was like, first of all, how do you know what Miss Saban's doing on Zillow in Austin? It's stalkerish, quite frankly.
Yeah, but it was very similar for us. It was, you know, there's the ebbs and the flows of the coaching search. We were all convinced that Dan Lanning was going to leave Oregon, which why in the world would he? From A&M, and then there was, you know, all of a sudden Ryan Day gets brought up. You know, he's not happy with how the Ohio State boosters are treating him, and then, you know, probably where it was always center, you know, there was the whole Mark Stoops thing getting hired, and that would have been a nightmare. Thank God that didn't happen. But I think it all ended up back where we kind of eventually all thought it was going to, with Coach Elko, and extremely popular as far as like the players went. You know, there's guys that I think pretty much every player on the team was either recruited by him, you know, when they were in high school, or played for him, you know, at a certain point whenever they're at A&M. So, you know, you've got a lot of familiarity there. He's obviously been at A&M. He knows everything there is to know about A&M. And like you said, I think just getting back to kind of, you know, that defensive, you know, like hard-nosed, blue-collar kind of mentality has been kind of, you know, what he's been preaching. And I think when you think about A&M, the teams that they've had in the past that have been successful, minus the, you know, the Johnny Manziel era, it was playing really strong defense. Yeah,
Wrecking Crew. Yeah,
Wrecking Crew, really strong defense. You know, and that's obviously kind of what I think has been really disappointing for us the past couple of weeks is like, you know, we expect big things out of our defense, and when you're giving up 44 on the road to South Carolina or going to overtime against an Auburn team that has struggled to score this year, it's like that's not really what's been expected. Now, there has been times where like the second half of LSU where we completely shut down that passing attack and forced 3 turnovers from Garrett Nussmeier, or there was the Missouri game where we had them shut out until like the beginning of the fourth quarter. So you've seen a little bit of both. It's just a matter of, do those kind of weaknesses get exposed? Or I definitely think we play a little bit stronger on defense at home, so that'll help. But I don't know. This is definitely going to be one of the better offenses we've seen, statistically and just, on paper as far as like players go.
Yeah, I mean, both those losses are on the road, so that's tough. I mean, I remember watching kickoff for the Auburn game, and it was just so loud. I just never seen Auburn that fired up, in a game where it's pretty much meaningless for them.
Yeah, that's 2 times in a row now that we've lost at Auburn in games that were like absolutely meaningless to them, and they just. That's the crazy thing about the SEC and playing night games. Like they matter still to so many people. And when you can put 90,000 people in a stadium, they're going to go all out.
Yeah. I mean, for those, Auburn fans, like some of those guys, like it's the last home game of the season for them. They're just going to get as, drunk as possible and, try to be as loud as possible.
Thanksgiving break.
Exactly. How much of it do you think came down to your team looking too far ahead into our game? Do you think any of that came down to it at all?
I don't think so. I mean, I know that was all blown up with Coach Elko making the mistake of saying we're focused on Texas last week, but just, being somebody that has been in a locker room before, in kind of what you would call a professional environment in college. We had games where we were playing an FCS team and the next week we're playing Alabama, and it was still so, everybody in the back of their mind knows like, okay, this is what's coming in the future. But as far as like prep, you always have like your quality control or your GA guys that are like focused on teams that you're playing in the future. But as far as like the head coach, the coordinators, the players, like you are solely focused on the team you're playing. And like, I mean, obviously nobody knew that Ole Miss and Alabama were going to go lose. But if A&M would have won that game last week, not that this game would be meaningless, but we'd be in the SEC championship already now because of tiebreakers. So, I mean, to say that the game against Auburn didn't matter is just absolutely crazy. But, it kind of – that game, the thing about A&M is they're going to play close no matter who they play. They could be playing – we beat Bowling Green by 6 this year. We beat Arkansas by 4. We lost to Notre Dame by 10, but they also scored with like, I think, 30 seconds left. I mean, that was a tie ball game with 3 minutes left. I think, we're going to play whoever we play close typically. It's just, it's kind of frustrating because you'll play bad teams and you think we should blow them out and we won't. But then we'll play a really good team and we'll play them close. And it's just kind of, it comes down to that fourth quarter. Like, can you execute? Can you make plays? And for most of the season, it was that way this year. And for these last couple games, it hasn't been that way.
On
it's been like that for a lot of teams, though.
Yeah, I mean, what team has been dominant, at the start of the whistle to the end of the game every single week this year in college football? There's been a ton of parity. I mean, like you said, nobody expected Alabama or Ole Miss to lose last weekend, or you guys, and all 3 of y'all did. And that's just the way that the SEC goes. That's just the way that college football goes sometimes. So based off of your opinion, and people are having these conversations, certainly Texas fans are, and I'm sure Aggies are as well. If you were to lose this game, do you think that Texas A&M is still a college football playoff team? Because the way that you're ranked right now by the CFP, I would say likely not.
Oh, but yeah. I mean, there's our only path to the playoff, if you ask me, is to win this one, and then we would have to go beat Georgia next week too. I think.
You think even with a loss in that game, especially if it's by some wide margin.
It's funny because you look at where Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina are right now, and I know we lost by 24 against South Carolina, but once again, if you like really dig in and watch that game was close until late in the fourth quarter, and then we turned the ball over like 2 times right in front of their end zone, and they scored 2 late touchdowns. But I think we're very comparable to all of those teams, but they're in that 13, 14, 15 bracket to where we're sitting at 20. And so just to win this game, to jump from 20 all the way to 12, and then you're talking about also losing to Georgia, so then you would, probably take another step back. I just don't think that's possible. I mean, unless we were to win by like 40 this week, which I think that would be more of like, okay, what's wrong with Texas? Not so much like what did A&M do right at that point. So I think that's way too many spots and way too many people to jump.
Yeah, it's also like if you lose one of these games, you're a 4-loss team, and they're just there's no way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Even if you beat Texas, lose to Georgia, you're 9-4. Like that's kind of hard to, unless there was just some crazy stuff to add. Like, I mean, I was going to say Georgia losing to Georgia Tech, but then you would be losing to them the following week, so you're not going to jump them. But there's still team. I mean, maybe if Tennessee loses to Vandy, and you kind of maybe you jump in front of them at that point,
or like SMU loses this week or something like that.
Yeah, or Miami loses to Syracuse this week.
Yeah,
then there's a conversation maybe, but if you were just asking me as things stand right now, I think that's just way too many spots to jump into.
But all this first of all, everything you guys listed could totally happen. Everything that like Vandy could easily beat Tennessee. Yeah. Like they just can't. Miami could go. Yeah, like Miami could go and then lose to Syracuse. There's no doubt in my mind that's completely plausible. I think it's for y'all's sake. The Auburn thing's unfortunate, and again, that shows like in an away game, like we were discussing pre-show because I was telling you I was at Michigan, right? And that Michigan game was so loud for the first 20 minutes, and then we pulled away, and then it wasn't loud again. But had that game been close, it would have been a completely different element factor. Like because Auburn A&M was tight throughout the game, the crowd's still in it. And when you're the underdog and the other team's favored, like we're favored against you guys in your house. If it's tight, the crowd's just going to get into it more and more and more. And like it's going to get worse for the opposing team as the game goes on. That's when the factor really happens. So I think that game is just unfortunate. We discussed in the past, though, like, being penalized for losing your conference championship. Like there should be some element of a reward for making the. That's why I think. But I think cook. But if they make it against Georgia, that's. Then
it becomes a conversation. But I think at that point it's like if they make it, it does depend how they look in that game against Georgia. In my opinion, I think other things have to happen. Like we didn't mention.
I think if we were sitting in that 13, 14, 15 range where those three teams are, and we beat you guys, you probably move up to kind of like your 10, 11, 12 range. Then as long as you don't get blown out in the SEC championship, then I think you deserve to be in. But just because where the committee currently sees us at 20, I just think it would be way too much to expect. If you beat Texas, then maybe they look at you and say, oh, okay, well, they're better than we thought they were. Maybe they're, in the realm of the fact that they left Alabama at 13 to me after getting beat by 21 against OU is just crazy.
They want them in so badly.
I can get the flip side of, the teams that they have beat, but it just, to me, it's, what have you done for me lately? And, just like how A&M has gotten penalized for losing,
right.
We dropped more spots losing a game by 2 in quadruple overtime than they dropped losing by 21 against basically the same caliber opponent.
Yeah, objectively, it doesn't seem fair if you look at those two teams and how they dropped. Great thing is, in the game that we didn't mention, the Iron Bowl is this weekend. So maybe Auburn beats Alabama.
I would not be surprised if Auburn beat them.
We've seen crazier stakes where the Auburn team has been worse than they are this year and ended up beating Alabama. I just thought it was funny. There was a game way early in the season. I can't remember who Auburn was playing, but Gus Johnson was on the call and Peyton Thorne threw a pick six. And he was like, and there's the Peyton Thorne that we know and don't love. And he throws a pick six. And then, of course, like he has a relatively good game against you guys.
He did have an insanely bad interception against us. And we're like, okay, yes, we finally got him. And then he flipped the switch and he started playing well again.
I mean, the margins are razor thin, though. That catch at third OT, I guess you'd call it, on the 2-point conversion was unbelievable by that Auburn receiver. And then you guys, one falls right through your hands there. That should have been a catch on a great play call. So that's how thin the margins are. And I think that it's going to be the same thing in this game. I was rewatching, I told you guys before we got on, but I was rewatching the 2011 game, and first quarter, I think the score was 13-0 Texas A&M. And if just by the looks of both teams, like Texas certainly had a lot of pros, Quandre Diggs, Emmanuel Acho, a guy that a lot of people know, Kenny Vaccaro, Justin Tucker, of course. The kickers in that game, elite. Randy Bullock on one side, Justin Tucker on the other. Tucker was also the punter that game. But A&M was up 13-0, and then Tannehill implodes and has 3 interceptions, one of which was a pick 6, and that got Texas back in the game. Texas scored on a wide receiver reverse pass, a pick 6, and then Quandre Diggs had an 80-yard return off the kickoff that set them up in the red zone, and they punched it in with Malcolm Brown, the running back.
That's a rivalry game for you.
Exactly. So
yeah.
I know that these guys don't necessarily know it because they were in elementary school, but as soon as they start hitting pads, like they're going to be locked in, and it's going to feel like they've played against these guys on the other side for their entire life. So it's going to be an awesome environment. But Josh, that's a great point. Like
back to
they're dogs, though. You guys are dogs, which is a scary place to be in. Yeah.
Back to Nick's recruiting point, like some of these guys have played against each other for their entire lives.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot of these guys are Texas guys. Like there's still some level of bad blood, even if you don't understand or haven't played in this rivalry game. It's the highest price ticket. We were talking about it on a show last week. Nick and Quan emphatically were like, it's going to be more watched than the SEC championship, even if it's like Georgia, Georgia. Yeah. And okay. So Jake is like no brainer. So this like might be the most watched game. It's not against Ohio State, Michigan.
It's the most anticipated game all season long of any game for any.
Yes. Or at least of any programs. Like there are no programs that are anticipating this game like we are anticipating this game and the Aggies are anticipating this game. Because every other team, like Georgia's not anticipating, no offense, they look better this year. They're not anticipating Georgia Tech. I guess Clemson, South Carolina's the most excited it's been in a while because there are some serious stakes for both those teams there, which is great to see. Michigan, Ohio State, this is the most lackluster Michigan, Ohio State game we've had in 5 years.
Yep.
So now I guess Ryan Day is coaching for his job because if he loses to this Michigan team, he's
for sure.
He's cooked. Like at that point, pack up, dude. I don't even care if you make the playoffs. But yeah, this is the most anticipated game of the weekend. Nick, you sent this hilarious tweet. If you could read it, I don't want to misquote it. It was so freaking funny.
Yeah, it was. I have to find it. I look at my computer. It's on my phone. It is Thanksgiving conversation topics: Israel, Palestine, the election, gender, reproductive rights, Texas A&M game. Parentheses risky. That's the risky topic.
Avoid at all costs.
Avoid at all costs. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about how it's been 13 years? Is it 13 years?
Yeah.
It's the same amount of time that between Avatar movies. Like that's how long it's been.
Well, that's what I was looking at. I was looking at like the series history of just like the games that I can remember. Like crazy. Like this isn't really that many games just because it's been, it's been so long since they've played each other. So,
well, and I think the timing couldn't have been better, honestly. Like when we were at Texas, we like to joke all the time. We might have seen the worst stint in Texas football history while we were there.
That's why I was really mad that we didn't play during those times. Because okay, we could have kind of caught up a little bit.
I mean, and it felt that way watching the game.
I really feel like A&M had something to do with the fact that's why we were so bad, because you guys were stealing recruits from us for right under our nose because they want to go to the SEC.
Yeah.
SEC, and also I'm watching that game the last time they played, and who's on the sideline, who's redshirted that season? Johnny Manziel, of course. Mm-hmm. So the next year he's playing. That brings a ton of hype, and of course you watch documentaries and you know anything about Johnny Manziel, you know how much money that brought to school as well. And how that changes things. And the SEC is a massive part of that. But
quick side note on Johnny Manziel really quickly. I feel like the person that he is, he could have only prospered in College Station. He would not have survived in Austin.
He would have got arrested too fast in Austin.
Well,
I feel like you guys
wasn't arrested before, but it would have been a much bigger deal.
I think the funny thing is I used to see him in Austin all the time when we were in college.
Yeah, he was in Austin a bunch.
He was buddied up with all the bar owners on 6th Street.
He wasn't on the most wanted radar yet, though.
True.
I was thinking when you said that, Nick, I was like, thank God they didn't have this rivalry game, because what would have happened? They for sure would have come into our house. He would have lit us up.
And he would have partied on
and then
6th
he would have
Street.
burned our drink our liquor, enjoy our women, eat our food. He would have burned our city to the ground. Like he would have
just brought everybody from Austin back to College Station.
Yeah, he would have sacked the city. Like he would have literally sacked the city. Like had they played. But yeah, I mean, again, like this game, I'm just hoping we see the best from our guy Quinn, because that's been the huge storyline. You know, you talk about your team being a point to tail of two halves. Like it's been like that for Quinn Ewers. There are drives when you're like, oh my God, this guy's a top 10 pick. And there are drives where like, dude, like this guy might be a 2nd or 3rd round pick, or like he might not even be NFL ready. And this is the game where you can go for a lot of guys, you know, Scorton against Banks, Stewart on the line against our offensive line, you know, Alfred Collins on our defensive line against your offensive line, Quinn Ewers against this defense. This is a money-making game for a lot of guys. Yep. And, you know, the stakes are still extremely high. Like winner goes to the SEC championship. Like this is, you can't script this any better. So we'll do maybe our tradition. And I think it's going to go a little bit differently than it typically does on our show, because typically the scores are heavy in favor of Burnt Orange. We'll close out with some more typical traditions as we do at the end of the show. We'll start with you, Toss. I'll go next. We'll close out. We'll do our guess, and then we'll close out with Nikki Snacks for the haymaker.
Gotta end y'all
score predictions. Toss, hit us with it.
Yeah, I was just pulling up the line real quick because I feel like we should at least
6.5.
6.5, and then I was going to look at the over under. It's 49. So, you know, they think this is going to be a close one. They think that the defense is going to come to play on both sides. I think I'm interested because Reed has been so dynamic for you guys, and something that the offense has really needed for Texas A&M at times, and just he provides looks that Wegman just can't. He can't do the same things, right? But Nick, you mentioned a guy that was in between both schools, committed and then flipped. Anthony Hill, just got slighted not only by one of y'all's offensive linemen, but also not being acknowledged as a semifinalist for the Butkus Award. I think he's one of the best linebackers in the country. Or if you want to call him an edge, you want to call him a linebacker. Like he plays all over the field, and he has tremendous speed. And I think Reed's job in that zone read will be critical in this game for y'all's offense, because we have more speed than I've ever seen watching Texas at the linebacker position and at the edge to catch up to guys who want to try and bounce runs outside. And because of that, I think that I feel like you guys, your offense is being given a little bit too much credit, not having your RB1 in there. Mm-hmm. And I think that our defense is going to once again solidify statistically and with the eye test that they're the best unit in college football, which they've been doing the entire season. And that is, you can debate it if you want. I don't really think it's a debate. And that's our bread and butter, Josh, as you pointed out. I'm going to say, but I think y'all's defense is good. And I think if Quinn can't move in this game, like there will be hell to pay in the backfield if they can get to him and make his job tough. I'm going to go with 24-13. So we cover, we don't score a lot of points, but we do just enough. And our defense remains king once again.
Damn, that was going to be mine.
Was it actually?
That was actually, the minute you said 24, I was like,
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with, I don't know. Because I think you're at home. There's nothing, I think we're going to win. I can't not pick us to win. And I think we're going to win. But I think you guys can cover. I think you guys cover. I think the 40, I see 48.5. If I see anything lower than 50 in an SEC game for a total, whether I actually think it's going to happen or not, like I feel like it's so low, you got to go under. Like that's where they want you to take the over. Like that's where they want you to take the over, and it goes under. I think you guys cover this one. I think you guys get a late score, and that's what makes it 24-20. And it gets a little exciting at the end. You guys get something going. I think Reed at his best can put up points. I think he's the better option, and I'm sure you'll agree, than Connor Wegman. Yep. And they could run the ball, and we have a lot of speed in our offense, on our defense. But again, Reed's a good runner. Your guy Daniels is a good runner. Like there's good running in that backfield, and I think that they're going to be able to put something up in some capacity. So I'm going to go 24-20. A&M covers, but the Longhorns win this one. And Quinn Ewers has a good game, not a great game against a really strong defense.
I like it. Honestly, both of y'all's scores, I think, are very realistic and not mean if you're trying to just be nice. But obviously, I'm going to pick A&M. I think just if you're talking about game flow, I think both teams are going to be a little tense to start. We're talking about rivalry. Game hasn't been played in a long time. As much as maybe the players will want to try to downplay it, they're going to get out there, and I think both sides are going to be a little bit tense. I think you might see some missed throws early by both guys. You might see, missed blocks, kind of stuff like that. That's kind of where normally defenses tend to just get in a comfort zone. I think as the second half rolls on, guys might get a little bit more comfortable, might make some adjustments. Texas might hit some screens, A&M might hit some runs, kind of stuff like that. But I think one area that, nobody likes to talk about kickers, but I think A&M actually does have a pretty solid kicker. Now, he missed a big field goal last week, but I think that was his first 50-plus to miss last week. Something that I think we don't do a good enough job of is scoring once we get past the 50, but he's kind of bailed us out a couple times this year. So I see us making a couple field goals. So that's why my score is going to be a weird number. But to flip the result from last time, we will be kicking a game-winning field goal this time, and it'll be 23-21 Aggies.
Nice. So he kicks 3 field goals then, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. My man Randy Bond.
Randy's. You have some
sweet name.
Randy's.
Sweet name.
It's funny you mentioned the kickers because this rivalry, has cemented itself, with the closing statement by Justin Tucker at the end of, the game to win it. And I think that this is also going to not come down to kickers, but I think that's going to be in play for sure. So I think our guy Bert Auburn, he's another guy. It's not talked about that much, but he's playing for some money too, because he's been up and down this season, and we all had faith in him this season, and I just don't think he's got as many opportunities. So if you really want to, earn yourself an opportunity in the league, and you want to, earn yourself in the right stance by the Texas fans, you got to hit big field goals in big games. So I think he's going to hit 2. I think I'm going to go 27-17. I think we cover, and it's going to be a low scoring game in general, because our defense is good, but also because I think you guys make a lot of adjustments that, happened from last week. If I'm looking at the last time you guys had over 40 points scored on you, mind you played New Mexico State the next week, but you held them to 3 points, right? You guys made some great adjustments. So I don't think that they're going to have back-to-back games where they completely just blunder it on defense. I think they're really going to come to play. They're going to, put all their juice into this game because it's a must win. I mean, we're talking about if you guys lose, you're done. But if we lose, we're not 100% done. Yep. There's a world where we're making it still. I think there's a 50% chance at least that we're still making the college football playoff.
I would say at this point, yeah, I would say y'all should be 100% at this point.
Yeah. So I mean,
obviously everybody's got their different opinions, but
right.
I can see if the Ole Misses and the Alabamas of the world didn't lose last week, but I think with those losses, you knock some of those guys out. Now you might have a South Carolina that might move themselves into the conversation or whatever.
Right. But at the end of the day, it's a 2-loss Texas team that lost on the road at Kyle Field in a heated rivalry game. We could live at that. But ultimately, I think what it comes down to is that we're a team that's always had problems starting off fast, getting off to hot, quick starts on offense. And we've had a couple of games this season where we did well in that right. But we mentioned this pregame show too. We can't allow the crowd to be that big of a factor. And if, we get up to a big lead, then the crowd's going to be taken out of it. Well, I think the reverse, you're going to keep us out of the game for a little bit in the first half because the crowd's going to be so in it and our team is not going to be able to score as quickly as that we'd like to. And so that's why I think it's a low scoring game on our end, with a good offense that eventually figures it out maybe in the second half, but because Sark is great at adjustments. But, there's not an environment these guys have played in all year long. We mentioned Michigan. That's the second week of the season. It was a long time ago. Obviously, that game flipped so quickly.
day game. It's a day game too, not a night game.
Exactly. But this is it. This is the last game of the season. Everything's on the line here. The rivalry's restored. Kyle Field, the 12th man. Like, you guys, are always expanding the amount of seats that you have in your stadium. Like, it's like that. It's that big of a deal. I mean, our road games this year, and I don't know how this is even possible, but it's been Vanderbilt, Michigan, and Kentucky. Like, that's in Arkansas. Sorry.
Arkansas.
Like,
yeah.
That's not Kentucky. Yeah, Arkansas. Those are the only road games that we've had all year. I mean, obviously we had the OU neutral grounds game, but there's not been any tests for the most part. I mean, Arkansas, you can mention like they hate us, but like they're also not
it's still tough to play at the Big House. It's tough to play in Fayetteville.
I want to say
what
I was
you
there.
You made a face at the day game. I get it, but night games in the SEC are different than a day game early in the season between Texas and Michigan. It is. It's just different.
I'm just saying though that Michigan, like, and Ohio State typically play during the day. Like, they're like, the Big Ten is accustomed to massive day games, and it's early in the season before we knew they stunk. Yeah. So they're coming off 1-0 and they're the defending national champions. Like, they're coming in hot.
I'm talking an A versus an A+ on the letter grade system. It's just the
sure,
slightest.
I will concede my face to that.
It's the slightest of bumps. I mean, the Arkansas, like, playing in Fayetteville and doing what we did was necessary, and we needed to show that on the road. It will be a completely different environment at Kyle Field. That was a good road win, though. I mean, we talked about the Auburn A&M game. Like, it is not easy to go to any of those places that have been at one point in time atop the SEC. I will not say the same for a couple of I won't say it for Vandy, right? Because we know that there were as many Texas fans as there were Vandy fans at that game, but it's few and far between. Almost every single SEC school, if you travel there, they get up, they get loud, they are attacking as much as they can vocally the other team. Yep. And it's going to be like that at Kyle Field. And the Kyle Field that we went to is not the same Kyle Field as the one we're going to 13 years later. It's a different set of stadiums if you look at them side by side.
I wonder how many kids are not getting Christmas gifts this year because their parents spent all their money on these tickets.
Gosh dang.
I mean,
ticket prices are insane.
My aunt she's I don't know which end zone it is, but she's row 13. She has 5 season tickets right next to each other, and each one is going for $2,000 a pop. And that's actually lowballing what the listed price is on Ticketmaster right now. So,
and she's selling or she's going?
I mean, they're selling for that high, but also people are having a hard time selling them because that number is so high. Yeah. So she might end up just going and giving them to family members who want to go, because we have so many Aggies in our family. But she's an LSU Tiger, so she's not going, but her husband and her kids are probably going to go. But I wanted to ask each one of you guys, do you think it matters who gets the ball first? And is there a more favorable position for the Aggies and a more favorable position for the Longhorns? Jake, I'll start with you.
I was going to say, I'll answer that first. So to Nick's point, I thought it was funny that Nick said y'all have been starting slow on offense because we have been starting slow on defense. And so I've been praying for us to just take the ball first in a game, because that's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
South Carolina and Auburn did the same thing on us. They both drove right down the field, and I feel like, first score, that just can really do something for you. Now, obviously, getting a stop can do a lot for you too, but I would almost kind of hope, I know we have a defensive head coach, but I would almost hope that we get the ball first and have a chance to maybe, like, now I know you're also talking about a really good defense. I've always been I'd rather be on defense first kind of guy, but just the way our team is playing right now, I'd almost hope that we got the ball.
I think first. As the underdog in your own stadium, that benefits you the most too. Because if you guys go up and it's 7-0, like, you're in a good spot, your defense is feeling themselves, you feel good about it. Tremendous challenge to do against Texas. But if
for me, the reverse. I'm with Jake. I want to play defense first.
Yeah.
I want them to play offense first, because I feel like drive one, if we're on offense, you have the full force of the 12th man on your side. Yeah. However, if you're on defense and you guys go 3 and out, or we get a pick, then, like, there's a little bit of deflation coming in there. You know what I mean?
Well, I think for me, it's like I as the favorite, and as we should, I think I feel comfortable in either one of those situations, because we've talked about it a lot this year too. If we do score, if Texas gets a lead in the way that Sark's offense moves, it's hard to keep up with us. And so if if we score initially, then they can put it all in a tough position.
Y'all can win the game kind of in multiple different ways, as to where I feel like at the point that we're at with our team, the way we're built, kind of in year one with the coach still, is like there's an exact formula that we need. And it's to be out in front and kind of, get kind of our pass rushers going, kind of all that deal. Obviously we were able to come back down 21-0 against Auburn last week, but that is not at all how we are built to play. We should not be dropping back, 40 times a game, especially against the secondary and a pass rush like y'all's. Like we were kind of able to get away with that against Auburn, but that won't be the case if that happens against you guys.
Josh, you feel the same as Nick? You'd like to be on defense first?
Oh yeah, I want to get on defense, and that's our best side. Get on defense, make a big statement, make a big play, hopefully. And like, look, if they come down, they score on our defense, and the 12th man gets in it, that's a risk I'm willing to take because I'm that confident in our defense and I'm that confident in our guys. They go 3 and out, we get the ball in a good spot, or we get a pick like Jade Barron, Makuba come up with a pick like that could flip the energy real quick. Yeah. And then your offense is coming out and you're like, okay, we have the ball in a good spot. Like, let's go put one down their throat right now. And then let's see how loud they are. Like, I think that's my mentality of what I would like.
Well, it's
versus the flip side of like what versus the flip side of what y'all are saying is like, if we come out on offense and we go 3 and out, or we're starting slow and Quinn turns the ball over, like that environment's going to get ugly really quick.
I'm also of the opinion of playing defense first, getting the ball at half, or he can be like our head coach in high school where he kicks it twice. He did that one game.
Yeah, we won that game by like 50, so it was okay.
Charlie Strong did it against UCLA.
Yeah, did he not? Maybe it was a test. And he was like, let's see how good these kids actually are.
He like chalked it up to that, but I think he just made a mistake.
It was a really windy game. And he was saying that he wanted them to have to go into the wind again, but I think he just messed up the defer part at the beginning of the game. So we ended up kicking off twice, and it actually ended up working because their punter actually kicked the ball backwards because of the wind, and our guy like caught it and ran it back for a touchdown.
Yeah, that's the only stuff that happens in high school.
Played out very well for our coach, but I don't think he did it on purpose.
That's fun.
I wish they had so many cameras in high school games because I feel like some of the craziest plays,
amazing things happen. I know,
most unbelievable things. If it's cool with you guys, I'd love to close out with Jake with a little "Would you rather."
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll close up for the radio, and then we'll do that. Or did you want to?
No, well, I'll make some edits around. I think it's a fun one. And I'll let you close us out, Nick. All right, Jake, we play something on our show. Would you rather? So it could be would you rather. It could be anything really, but sports related. And since you are an Aggie, and we've mentioned him once or twice on this show, maybe you could say the greatest Aggie to ever do it, or most exciting Aggie. Would you rather at their best in college, Johnny Manziel edition?
Okay.
So I'll put you up Johnny Manziel versus somebody. Okay. Would you rather at their best in college, Johnny Manziel or Jameis Winston?
Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel or Jalen Hurts?
Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel or Kyler Murray?
Johnny Manziel.
Ooh. Johnny Manziel or Lamar Jackson?
Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel or Marcus Mariota?
Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel or Robert Griffin III?
Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel or Caleb Williams?
Johnny Manziel. Easy.
Johnny Manziel or Baker Mayfield?
Johnny Manziel. Shout out my boy Baker, though.
Wow. Johnny Manziel or Joe Burrow?
God, that's like the one that you might give me pause. That LSU offense in 2019 might be the favorite offense I've ever watched in my entire life. The Aggie in me is just going to say Johnny Manziel because that would be wrong for me to say Joe Burrow. But if there were one for me to pick, it would be Joe Burrow.
Okay.
You would pick Tebow over him?
Johnny Manziel or Tim Tebow?
Johnny Manziel.
Wow.
Johnny Manziel or Vince Young?
Johnny Manziel.
Oh my God!
I think Johnny. You got to realize the team that Johnny had around him, and the fact that he was able to do what he did was insanely impressive.
You're taking Johnny Manziel over Cam Newton.
Okay, that's another one that would give me pause.
Yeah, that's your Blinn guy. Now you have tied to both.
There we go.
Both guys.
I'll give that a toss up.
I love that.
Well, it's interesting. When I rewatched Texas A&M game from way back when, I was like, okay, Tannehill's on one side, Case McCoy, there's David Ashland on the sideline, there's Johnny Manziel. I was like, who won the Heisman? They're showing the ticker at the bottom's going because it's just the broadcast. It's like, okay, that was the year Tyrann Mathieu had all those touchdowns. That was the year Ndamukong Suh was dominating. And then I was like, oh wait, Robert Griffin III won the Heisman. Texas and Texas A&M kind of were not great that year, and Baylor was really good, and he was dominating the Big 12. So those are dicey picks, I gotta say.
He was a guy. I think I saw the other day, who was it? Milroe. I think Milroe has like 16 rushing touchdowns this year or whatever.
Yeah.
And you go back and look at Johnny. Johnny ran for 21 touchdowns. And like, to be as small as he was, to run for 21 touchdowns is just because he's not getting all those cheap touchdowns like, the Cam Newtons or the Jalen Hurts of the world either, where you're like quarterback sneaks or like quarterback power. Like, he was legit running like 40-yard touchdowns all the time. That dude was insane. And then while also throwing for, I think, like 35 or 40, he was electric.
Yeah. He was special.
All right.
Yeah, Burrow. Here's my three that I would, if I were not an Aggie, that I would obviously potentially change my answer. If not, it would go head to head. It would be Burrow, Newton, and Vince Young. Those would be the three.
I'll take it.
We'll take it. All right, close us out, Nikolai.
All right, horns up. Talking Texas, big game day. Texas versus A&M. Nick Kreider, Josh Fisher, Alex Sopoulos, and Jake Hubenak. We'll see you next time. Get your horns up.
Hook 'em.
I knew that was coming.
I figured I had to do that at some point.
Well,